Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Janáček, Essential Works for Beginners. One of you pointed out that I hadn't done this list yet, and I went, oh my God, how could I have left it out? Because I had it prepared. I just had to actually talk about it, So now I'm talking. Janáček is like one of the most fascinating composers of the 20th century because he was really a 19th century composer who matured in the 20th century. He died in 1928. And but for those like 28 years after 1900, starting with the opera Jenufa, which was around 1905, he created one masterpiece after another in a style which is like absolutely nobody else. It's visceral. It's passionate. It's incredibly directly emotionally affecting. It's really just incredible. And his style was very interesting. People talk about how he created his melodies out of the rhythms of Czech speech. Now, Czech speech is rather abrupt. It's lots of consonants, not many vowels, like msha, glagolskaya, and snert, and it's like Eastern European, vowels are a sometime thing. And so, and lots of little syllables. And so his melodies, they're not even melodies, they're more like motives, tend to be rather brief. He could write a tune once in a while, but he wanted to, but they're incredibly catchy because they're based also on the modality of Czech folk music. And he accompanies them with rapidly changing ostinati, meaning repeated rhythmic figures, usually four-note little groups going like this. So the music moves. And because it's so compact in its expression, nothing he wrote is crazy long, but he shoves a tremendous amount of expression into it. So you can listen to 2 or 3 minutes of his music and it'll just ring you out. You just think when it's over, it's like, whoa, that was a big thing. But it was actually pretty brief. It's remarkable. Anyway, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces here. Most of his music was vocal. He was, above all, a composer of operas. You've got to get used to operas. You've got to get used to people singing in Czech or English translation. But they are so exciting and different and quirky and like nothing else you've ever heard. But we begin with orchestral works, and there are only 2. He wrote more, obviously. He wrote some tone poems. He wrote some, collections of dances and other goodies and some early suites and things. But for mature orchestral pieces, there are only 2 major works, and they almost always come coupled together on the same disc if you're buying physical product. Otherwise, you could just listen to them separately. The first is the Sinfonietta. Now, the Sinfonietta means little symphony. Well, it is a little symphony because it's only like 20 some odd minutes long in 5 movements, but it happens to be written for this enormous orchestra, including like 14 trumpets. Yes, 14. There's an initial fanfare thing for timpani and 9 trumpets and 2 tenor trumpets and tenor tubas and just this immense brass section. And then there are 4 movements for the full orchestra with the whole fanfare brass thing coming back at the end. So the result is just, first of all, it's glorious sounding. Emerson, Lake and Palmer used the opening fanfare for their song Knife Edge, by the way. And it's brilliant and it's exciting as hell. And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't sound like anybody else because he uses very interesting combinations of instruments throughout the work. In his later life, Janáček actually drew his own music staves on paper because he wanted to be as sparing as possible in his use of instruments. He didn't want any fat in his music. But the result of that, it was kind of bizarre. You should see his manuscripts because, the staves are not always straight and you don't know what he's doing. And, it looks like flies crapping on a piece of paper. It's really kind of amazing. But he liked to have very high and very low instruments, like low trombones and high piccolos. And when you hear it, it sounds rich and full and colorful. And if you look at it on a piece of paper, you're just going to go, oh my God, it looks like it's going to sound ridiculous, but it doesn't. It's really stunning stuff. Before the Sinfonietta, a few years before that, he wrote a rhapsody, an orchestral rhapsody called Taurus Bulba. You may know the movie with Tony Curtis and Yul Brynner. It's about a Cossack and his son, or his sons. He's got a bunch of them. They all get killed. And he gets killed at the end. And the three movements describe, the death of one of his sons, the death of another one of his sons, and then the death and apotheosis of Taurus Bulba. It doesn't sound promising, does it? Boy, is it exciting. Holy cow, it's got everything. It's got bells, it's got an organ, it's got harps rippling around, it's got battle scenes, it's got cymbals doing sword fight music, ka-chung, 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 ka-chung. It's incredible. Listen to those two pieces. If they don't hook you, nothing will. Then he wrote some astonishingly amazing chamber music. There's a wind sextet called Youth that he wrote when he was in his 70s. There's a lovely violin sonata, but most importantly are two extraordinary string quartets. Both of them have nicknames. One is the Kreutzer Sonata, after the Tolstoy novel, and it's really about the abuse of women. I mean, it's about domestic violence, and they're partly programmatic, partly not. So there's that one, and then the second one called Intimate Letters, which reflect Janáček had an infatuation. He was married, but he and his wife hated each other. So he fell in love with a woman 40 years younger than he was. Her name was Kamila Stoslova. And he wrote hundreds of letters to her constantly about, and she didn't know what to make of him because she had this old man. She was happily married with a kid, but she put up with it rather gracefully. And in fact, he caught the pneumonia that killed him running around looking for his kid and her kid in the rain. I mean, he was really a loon when it came to that. But his passion as an old man and totally infatuated is reflected in this volcanic string quartet. And it uses the kinds of things that he did in his big orchestral work, that is those chugging ostinatos and very high violin writing and strange sonorities, lots of plucked pizzicato notes and wiry sounding playing on the bridge, which sounds really kind of metallic sounding, ponticello it's called. They don't sound like anyone else's string quartets. And if you shy away from chamber music or string quartets, you should hear these because they are amazingly colorful works. And in terms of expression, I mean, they go straight to the heart, like bang, they're like all of his music is like that. It just hits you. Next, his great choral work, the Glagolotic Mass. Glagolitic is a script. It's the text, which is written in Old Church Slavonic. But we all know what the Mass says. You don't have to worry about even what they're singing about. I mean, you just have to know what the text of the Mass is. The Kyrie, the Gloria, the Credo, the Sanctus and Benedictus, and then the Agnus Dei. That's what it's got. But it's also got an amazing fanfare opening, somewhat like the Sinfonietta, and an insane organ solo at the end, and another orchestral piece to end the whole thing. Janáček was not religious, not at all. I mean, this is just a piece of a raw, bleeding chunk of passionate, transcendental fervor, like everything he wrote. And it's not that long. It's only about like 35, 40 minutes if you're pushing it. It's one of the great choral works of the 20th century, and everyone I know who's heard it has just been blown away. I mean, it's that kind of a piece. Then we've got to deal with two operas. I mean, he wrote his mature operas. There are 5 or 6 of them, depending whether you include his comic opera, The Excursions of Mr. Bruchek, which I think you should, because it's hilarious and it's marvelous. But they are Jenufa, and then Copacabana, The Cunning Little Vixen, The Macropolis Case, and From the House of the Dead. Now, Jenufa was his first major masterpiece. He wrote it as his daughter Olga was dying, and it's an incredibly gripping story, a true story, as it turns out, actually, of infanticide and love, ultimately, and village life. It grabs you like nothing you'll ever hear. I've done other videos of Janáček's music, and I really do recommend that you have a look at the Janáček playlist on this channel, because I talk about these works. And there's one video in particular where I talk about the most harrowing 3 minutes in all of music, and it comes from this opera, the second act, when Janáček's foster mother, her name is Kostelnička, the church sextoness, decides to murder Janáček's baby so that she can get married to somebody else because the father's a jerk. It's a whole story. Whoa, baby, that'll make you sweat. It's just extraordinary. So when you have to tackle an opera, especially one in a foreign language that you may or may not know, the best thing to do is to just sit down with the text and follow it. And listen to the music, or alternately, just play it without any text at all, like a symphony, and listen to the voices. The music is unbelievably powerful, as it is in The Cunning Little Vixen, the next opera. This was the first opera ever based on a comic strip. All the characters are animals, except for the gamekeeper and his wife and a couple of poachers. The humans are intruders into the world of the animals. And of course, they all speak and talk to each other. And it's an opera about the eternal cycle of being, that is birth and death and renewal. And I'm not going to say more than that about it, because it is a rhapsodic ode to nature from a composer in his later years. And it's so touching and so beautiful. Really an extraordinary piece. It's another one of those works how when it's over, you're sort of a changed person. It just gives you this rush of wonderfulness, as his music tends to, even the tragic stuff. I mean, his other operas, the Macropolis case, about a 337-year-old opera singer who's looking to retake her potion to keep her alive for, another several centuries, and then decides that it's not worth it at all. And from The House of the Dead, which is based on Dostoevsky, it's an opera for almost entirely male voices. It takes place in a Siberian prison camp and has no real plot. The prisoners just interact. I mean, these are operas about totally new subjects, expressed in a language that is so directly communicative that, I mean, he could have set the Prague telephone directory and we would wind up crying when it was over. That's the kind of music he wrote. So there you have it, my friends. Very, very simple. 7 essential works for beginners. If you're interested in Janáček, start with the orchestral stuff, go on to the chamber music, the choral music, and then the operas. Or if you like opera and if you like vocal music, do it in any order you want. But that's my suggestion. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.